Welcome to the Sales Compensation Show, where we share the latest sales performance insights through in-depth discussion with experts. Season 3 of our show is your backstage pass to discovering how today's most successful sales and revenue ops teams support go-to-market strategy and improve sales performance. Plus, we'll explore what we can learn about incentives from different industries more broadly. Subscribe to hear how leaders are unlocking new growth, implementing the latest compensation trends, and their priorities for improving go-to-market performance. I'm your host, CEO of Form AI, Nabeil Alazzam. Ryan, great to have you on the show. Super glad you're here.
Thanks for having me, Nabeil. Really glad to be here.
You know, I start out every episode with how you got into the wonderful world of sales compensation.
Like every other guest on the show, it's always by accident, right? There's no degrees in sales comp. It's not something you're told about as even a career, a field of sorts. But like most people, I was a senior financial analyst at the time, and somebody comes to me and says, "Hey, we need help with commissions." I'm like, "Great, this is something I'm gonna do once a month for 12 months, right? Keeps me nice job stability, so I'm gonna take this on." Little did I know, one, how hard it was, two, how much I would enjoy it at the same time. My very, very first job out of college, I worked in sales for 3 weeks and I sucked. And the moment I knew I would never make it in sales is I was calling the CTO of Major League Baseball at the time. I don't know his name, but I just remember seeing his name and title on the sheet, trying to sell some energy saving software. And I don't want to quote him verbatim, but he basically told me to off, right? Like, you're terrible at your job. And I almost like went into tears, like, this is just not for me. So I was fired, rightly so, within 3 weeks. But I just have a great respect for what salespeople do, right? I love being near them. It's kind of the heartbeat, the pulse, the muscle, whatever people want to phrase it as, of the business. So anything I can do to be closer to them, I want to do that. And I kind of use my qualitative or quantitative background in finance to kind of leverage myself in there, but have since evolved into, more HR work, sales ops, rev ops, sometimes IT, just depending on your org structure. So being able to touch the entire commercial front end of the business is what really just excites me. At the end of the day, I get to see a bunch, touch a bunch, and help the company grow in the long term.
Sales comp touches even the back, like the internal operations and the product. Like you actually need to know where your cost of sales are, and it's a disadvantage point where you get to interact and see how the whole business operates.
Yeah, what's nice about what we do, or maybe it's not nice depending on your perspective, is that everybody seems to have an opinion on the optimal incentive at the end of the day. So you always get to have fun conversations with people, but you get to see like why finance has this perspective, or why HR has a perspective, or why sales has a certain perspective. So you can kind of understand kind of the undercurrents to what is pushing them one way or the other. It's just something I really enjoy getting those conversations here and there.
Yeah, 100%. And it is way harder than you expect. I've hired people from outside this industry to work at Forma, whether it's engineering or other parts, and they are blown away always by how complicated it is. And so it's, in every aspect, it's difficult.
For sure.
Yeah,
For sure.
So normally I wait till the end of the episode to kind of tee up the hot take, but it's such a good one. I wanted to really kind of, maybe kick us off with it.
Sure. I think doing what you do in anything, in any space in life, it's always good to question what you do a little bit. Like, is this actually good? Do I actually believe this? Do I actually find value in this? So I constantly ask myself, are sales compensation plans necessary? Are they good? Are they actually driving growth? Because from a contrarian perspective, you could say sales comp plans are at best over-engineered, and maybe at worst unnecessary, and sometimes even detrimental to long-term corporate growth and professional growth. Some kind of a side story on this is when I became a parent, I thought about this more and more. I really struggled with potty training with my oldest child, didn't know what I was doing. Constantly, as she went potty, I'd try to give her like a little M&M or something, like a little incentive, right? Like, I design incentives, I know it works. Then I watched some sort of parenting video, and they said I was doing it totally backwards, right? Like, if you give the incentive, they're never going to want to do it. They'll sit on the potty for a candy, and like you haven't taught them anything, right? Like, okay, maybe I need to rethink this a little bit, right? And you need that intrinsic driver to move forward. And it seems from books I read on parenting and other spaces, just on general research in our space, that extrinsic motivation can kill intrinsic motivation, right? So you offer that reward or that incentive, you can actually reduce somebody's desire to want to do something at all. And all they might care about is a reward. And once you pull that reward away, it's just gone forever. So I feel like what I've learned more in the last few years has really been from trying to be a better parent as best I can here. Still struggle to this day, but the way your children grow, the way you want them to kind of learn and just be better humans in the world, do sales comp plans on the flip side. do that for sales reps, right? Do they want to be more curious about their customers? Do they want to kind of learn the product a bit more, right? Do they want to just see the best outcomes, even if it doesn't mean a sale for them, right? The sales plans potentially could just be interfering with all that, right? And now they're just chasing high attainment, higher compensation, right? And kind of like a winning losing mentality. If you're not winning, right, you feel crappy. And if you win, you're not even necessarily all that satisfied because you're only as good as your most recent win. So you might feel good right at that moment. And, like maybe some poor drug choices, right? You get that initial spike and then it wears off very quickly. And then you're constantly just chasing that high, but it's not for the good things. You're just trying to feel like you're valued and validated at the end of the day. So that's what I'm always asking myself, right? Do sales comp plans move the needle, right? I think there's at least enough research out there to say maybe not. Maybe not. If there's good research to support that it does. But does it, right? I'd be curious just from your end if you've seen that type of negative response from a sales plan.
So I ask myself this question all the time because where's the world going, and I'm building a whole business on this belief that when you dig in, I think intrinsic motivation is arguably the most powerful if you can get that fully aligned, right? Like
Mhm.
people do crazy things for ideologies, purposes, whatever, right? Like if you believe in something, you will go, and you'll put everything at it. I think the question is if you think about average comp or OTE comp for a sales professional, it's significantly higher than other IC roles. I mean, okay, now you have the extreme on in any single role, whether it's engineering or whatever. But because of the higher comp, it's a difficult business proposition to make in terms of actually saying that everyone's going to make this comp and we're going to define it and we're going to give that based off
Mhm.
intrinsic motivation. So I think when you factor in the level of comp relative to other types of roles, if you just had it as intrinsic and not variable,
Mhm.
you are inherently not going to drive the culture of those that are willing to put up a stake or put at risk in terms of part of their comp
Mhm.
because they're confident that they have the right skill set to do it, right? Like the reps that are not hitting quota, they're not selling. If you have a significant portion at variable, then the good ones that can know that they can go pursue other career paths that are better suited to their skill sets will eventually
Mhm.
make more than the base salary of sales. So I think when you factor in all the dynamics, despite intrinsic being, I think like if you get that right, it's way better than anything else. But when you factor in all these other dynamics, I do believe that incentive and from a variable pay perspective drive performance. And there are a bunch of studies on the other side, right, that show that having variable pay does drive better outcomes. I think the question you have to sit back and say is like, are most organizations doing a good mix of overall management of their sales performance? You go into some organizations, they way over index on just the comp plan and then they don't do enough enablement. They don't really do like they don't build culture or intrinsic motivators. Others, they're very strong here, but their incentives are far too simple, so they're not really kind of driving optimization where they could be. So that to
Mhm.
me is kind of the bigger opportunity area that I see.
Yeah, I think about a nickel for every time somebody's like, "Oh, it's let the comp plan weed people out," right? Like that's a really bad plan, right? Like
Yeah.
it's not that the plan is bad, but the leadership is bad, right? They're not willing to have tougher conversations, right? You could guarantee somebody's comp potentially a 300,000 OT instead of a 150 and 150, 50-50 mix there, and just hey, you know what? It's not working out, and get them out of the business, right? Performance improvement plans are done quite frequently. It's just part of being in management, right? It's a part of having those hard conversations,
Yeah.
right? Just like you would have a hard conversation with a customer, like, hey, our product can do X, Y, and Z, but it won't do A, B, and C, right? Like, sorry, that's not us, right? If you want this, maybe look someplace else. There's just certain things that you can't do. And I think that they generally weigh too much on the comp plan to, oh, if it just underpays them, they'll kind of weed themselves out, which I think there's still some truth to that. But I just don't know that it's as successful as it would be in the sense of I think I agree that there are other rewards that you can do. Stock incentives, right? People really seem to thrive off of
Yeah.
ownership in their roles, right? I think the tough part for sales reps is maybe just because they earn such a large short-term variable, a lot of companies don't give them nearly as much longer-term incentive as they would maybe a product or an engineering team. And they well, they don't have a short-term incentive, so they need the long. Like, there's maybe a balance to be had there a bit. But having the higher OTEs might get you the best reps. You might find them quicker. In my brief experience when I actually was able to test this out a bit, our debate that we have on our side, right? Should we pay on outcomes or should we pay on inputs? When somebody's doing the work, you can usually see that it does pay off in the long term, right? If somebody's not doing the work, they might get lucky here or there, right? But you can only do so well for so long. The ones who truly pursue excellence, we've all seen them, we all know them, right? The truly best sales reps, it's not that they have the largest territory or the largest, but they just know how to make deals happen. They know how to close customers. They know what's important to their customers. They know how to value them from a pricing perspective, from a volume perspective, right? Just to bring a revenue all together, volume times price. They are very good at that stuff. And everything else seems to be a distraction because I think when you recruit sales reps to an organization, the first question when you're talking with a recruiter might be, what's the comp? And the recruiter says, we're very competitive here. That's You're already immediately skeptical. Like, is that good or bad? Is competition good or bad? Right? That's a super high philosophical question for another day. Like, is that good? I don't know. You said competitive, right? Tell me if it's higher, if it's lower, just tell me a number, right? So you start on kind of a weird foot. And then if you ask somebody if they want to be paid or if they want to be incentivized, you told somebody, hey, I'll pay you to do this, they might do it. Hey, I got a little incentive for you, right? Again, you're a little bit more skeptical, right? It's not obvious right away, but when you kind of subconsciously think about it and kind of see how people react, this is why I'm using recruiting. We tested this right there, and people had far more negative responses to, hey, we have a good incentive plan versus we pay people for the work that they produce here, right? Like just a little small change in the verbiage can drive a much more positive outcome in somebody's outlook on your organization from an external perspective by offering them I guess a guarantee is the best way to phrase it. It's just a base salary,
Yeah.
but it's just a way of saying this is the stuff we're taking everything off the table, right? Like we're going to pay you, but this is what we're going to ask of you, right? And this is what's important to us. And this is what we want to drive. In my own career, when I interned at Costco, it was like 20 plus years ago. I was super lucky to work with the CFO for a few weeks here and there. But their mission statement that he basically said at every meeting that he went to is we obey the law, we take care of our customers, we take care of our employees, and we respect our vendors, right? Those are the four things that they constantly talked about. And none of that has to do with like short-term incentives or anything like that. They taking obey the law off the table, right? Just take care of your customers, right? Like that's why
Yeah.
people love Costco. That's what they do first and foremost, right? People who do that first, who do the I'll take care of the people around me, they do better and people really like that and they feel it, right? And then they also pay their teams really well, right? Because they might not pay the most, right, compared to like a Netflix or a high tech company, but in their space, they're one of the better payers out there. And people know that they pay their employees well. And then again, they do better, right? Like all these things are kind of almost a self-fulfilling cycle there. When you get those types of outcomes, it's hard to say that this doesn't work, this model doesn't work. You could say, well, it's just Costco, it's a one exception, but I would bet there's a lot more examples out there that do fit this mold that maybe are more local to maybe where you live potentially. People like going to certain restaurants because they like the ownership, not because necessarily the food's pretty good, right? They just like the people that are there. It's a matter of being in those spaces, and salespeople are no different than us. I think we treat them a little bit differently and tell them they're a bit coin operated, which they might lean more towards, as if there's a spectrum out there. But at the end, they're still human, right? They're still putting risk aversion more likely first than just being super risk on in a lot of situations. And I think that's where you want to be able to see how you can separate them, right? Who's got the intrinsic motivation to want to get better day in and day out versus who do I got to keep paying begrudgingly because they're unhappy and they're going to leave us if we don't pay them enough. It's something I think a lot of companies struggle with, and I don't think that the incentive structure is facilitating that in any positive way. Some smaller circumstances.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, you only want to have variable pay where the sellers have influence, right?
Hmm.
Where like what's within their control. And I mean, I agree with you on like the intrinsic stuff, like getting a sales team to understand the product or service that's being delivered, feel ownership and pride in delivering that, selling that offering to a customer to actually solve problems. I mean, there's a lot to unpack. These are all things that should be done on the intrinsic side. You need to
Hmm.
be coaching, messaging, like exciting the team to the cause or mission, the values of the business. That just needs to be done regardless of whether you're paying variable or not. And
Hmm.
then on the variable side, it's like what is actually in their control where if that person is looking for 300K, in your example,
Hmm.
OTE, thing that actually matters to them during the interview is, okay, that's your 300K OTE. What percentage of reps, what's the average attainment, and what's the percentage of reps that are actually attaining? And the second thing would be, what are the accelerators? Because that's where, again, if I think about like the profile of those 10x sellers,
Hmm.
I do think that like there is definitely a profile. They're just like, they just can go in, they know exactly how to talk to the customer, they know exactly how to uncover the real pain points and kind of take a customer on a journey that they would never have been able to go through on their own and actually lead them to a much better outcome. You take a look at those sellers and they're not looking at the 300K. They're looking at to see, if they can get close to the 500, 600K with kind of that like upside and acceleration.
I agree. I think from if we're talking kind of sales comp best practices
Yeah.
standpoint, right? You want generally, maybe it's a wide range, but 55 to 70% of your team at OTE, right? So the expectation is basically you're pretty close to that. Those who are short, right? Like they're still pretty close, all things being equal. I call it hopefully 90% of that, maybe a little bit
Yeah.
better. There's a handful of people that are just over that threshold. It's really just a small few that are way, way above that are chasing their big dollars, right? So I think well, the expectation is 300K of comp, right? Like, why do we necessarily want to tie it to these short-term outcomes, which again might not be best for customers, might not be best to kind of get the quote unquote behaviors. If you even take a step back, right? I think there's skepticism from sales reps perspective when because I do this all the time. We talk about what type of behaviors do we want out of these sales reps, right? And an incentive plan by design could be construed as control, right? Like I'm trying to get you to do something for me, right? I'm trying to, you're my dog, right? I have to sit, stay, obey, right? Like those types of things, right? And it doesn't necessarily come off that way right away to most people, but subconsciously it might hit you that way. And it might do it at larger numbers than maybe people are willing to admit to. So I think that's kind of a negative downside to that.
Yeah.
But
So I mean, yeah, especially when you make big changes.
yeah, when
That's
you make
how
big,
it
especially when
spells.
you make big
Yeah.
changes, right? Like, and I don't want to come on and be like, well, philosophical, let's just get rid of incentive plans, right? And not replace like you got to have
Yeah.
something, right? So I thought about things with models that work, maybe to some degree more or less, but sports are usually a pretty good area, right? Where you're generally best athletes on the field are your highest paid. But if they have a bad season, right, you don't take their money back. If somebody's, lower paid and they have a great season, you don't go pay them more. They have an opportunity in the future to change their rate, right? So I'm not saying sign, sales reps to 2 to 5 year contracts for a ton of money, but that's a framework that could potentially work here, right? You have one good year, hey, we'll increase your total pay package here, right? You have 2 or 3 good years, right? We'll give you another large pay package here, right? Maybe get you involved in other pieces of the business. Like there's ways to structure your comp so that it could then pay your best people more money still, that still return you a large sum of money. I think LeBron James, right? Like how much does he earn the Lakers right now out? He has a $60 million salary, something like that. But the market would dictate he should earn way more. But he also brings in brand value to the franchise. He's one of Nike's best brand ambassadors, right? Like he makes a ton of money elsewhere. Sales reps don't necessarily have that ability, but
Yeah.
I see reps all the time now on LinkedIn, right? Maybe start using your platform. There's like ways to expand, right? People who truly pursue excellence, you can see it and it's obvious, and that's why we like following them on most socials. I'm guilty of that too. There's certain people I like, right? But what separates good from great is razor thin sometimes, but it's such a large distance. It's maybe we'll cover a little later, but it is something where I think excellence is so far removed from like really good in a lot of ways, that potentially you pay people a lot for quick gains early on and then smaller gains later, but because it's so much harder to go that extra step.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I mean, I agree with you. It's an
Mhm.
interesting take on. So maybe let me play devil advocate in terms of the discussion. So
Sure.
with sports, you have, years of validated data-driven approach. So it's like
Mhm.
you're basically investing years proving that you can do something. And all you look at all the way that drafts are done, it's
Mhm.
based off of history, metrics, etc. And they usually start out at some level, and then obviously the contracts grow significantly once they are like
Mhm.
validated in real
Right.
life, in terms of like at the top tier level.
Mhm.
Um, so obviously in sales, we don't necessarily you don't have that. So that's kind of one thing. I think the other piece is in sports, and I do use analogies in terms of sales to sports quite a bit because I think there's an element of, you know, it is a team sport, but you as an individual have your part to play, and if you don't deliver, like there's no room for you on the team. You have to be that like diligent about performance management if you
Mhm.
want to play like a tier one, right? A professional tier one of any professional sport.
Mhm.
So I think the larger organization, the harder that is, naturally, to performance manage people in that way.
Mhm.
And you have to do it quickly because otherwise it just looks like people are getting a free ride and that doesn't make sense, which then
Mhm.
there's practical limits to that. The counter argument I have is you have a very grueling job, like being an IC in sales
Mhm.
and not doing it just to get to management and go above, which has its own different challenges and difficulties as you kind of like scale. But if you're an IC and you're going to do it for 20 years, I think the top, like the best reps, the best sellers, they're getting beat up like linebackers day in, day out. and
Mhm.
they're doing it in terms of stress and whatever, and like managing, like getting to that number and hitting that target. And, you know, it is the stressor, the push to continue driving at that pace
Mhm.
constantly. Because the moment that you get comfortable is the moment that then, now you need performance management to be like on you. And then what? You get like a warning and then a second warning, and then you lose out versus now you're impacting your variable pace. And now like those best performers are constantly thinking about, they're driving towards that number. And so that's where it's kind of like that saying, democracy is the worst form of government, except it's better than everything else.
Yeah.
Right. And I think it's, to
Mhm.
me, in sales, it's like sales comp plans are probably the worst way to manage people, but it's better than everything else. And
Yeah, yeah.
yeah,
The ones where I definitely agree with you on are the first 2 points where, you know, they get paid a lot of money because there's data and there's history. You can kind of track that stuff.
yeah,
There's not that corporations, even if they're publicly owned, don't share this information, right? You don't really know who's good
yeah.
and who's not necessarily.
Exactly.
I
And
mean, you
sometimes that
can.
you can't even share that, right? You can't share that someone's bad like that.
Exactly,
Yeah,
right? Like, so there's like a scarcity secrecy question, right? Which markets tend to favor, right? So it's already going against the sales rep. The second piece is there's no public, again, rep view is actually probably close to that, right? They have like, here's our team averages, but again, those are self-reported from reps.
exactly. And
Some
there,
might
I
be
think there's
info.
actually a lot of bias in those
I
in those numbers because the
I agree,
people,
right?
yeah,
It would be like the your top athletes reporting their own statistics. They're like, oh yeah, made all my baskets today. I got all the rebounds, right? And the shots I didn't take, I got an assist on, right? Like
yeah,
it's easy to kind of pump up your own numbers on that front. But second thing is also to be technical a bit, it's a closed loop system. A game is going to end, right? There is a final score. It
yeah,
might end in a tie sometimes, depending on sport, but there is a definitive outcome and it ends, right? Sure, your performance period as a sales rep, whether it's quarterly, biannual, annual, multi-years sometimes, it does end, but like the motion, it just keeps going and going and going, right? There's
yeah,
no off season. There's no way for you to maybe take
yeah.
a month, two
Customers
months.
don't just
Yeah.
stop buying at the end of the fiscal year and
Exactly.
restart
There's
the
no,
sales
it's hard
process.
to like make time to train and for what you do, right? Like go to courses, conferences, listen to people, read book, all that stuff, right? It's very hard to do, right? I think we would need to restructure the working world a bit differently on that front. Um, but the one I might just push back on, not saying you're right or wrong, but again, like you get to that point where, well, they're not willing to push any further. Now, why is that, right? Maybe that's just they're in the average rep, right? Or they're still good, but like you want more out of them. It's again, there's so few people that are truly excellent, right? Sports is just easy because they're the 1% of the 1% of the 1%. You see them on TV, like,
Yeah,
and they make it look easy, right? True sales reps are no different. They make selling look so easy. You're like, how did you get that conversation started, right? How did you guide them one way? How did you get them to pay 10% above retail price? Like, so many questions on we can learn so much from them, and I think there's so little documented. I know companies try and take their best salespeople and like put them in it. It's why it doesn't translate in sports either, right? Like just do what Steph Curry's doing, right? Shoot more 3 pointers, and everybody's tried, but they can't seem to do it quite as well, right? Like
yeah,
there's a point where our expectations of these reps don't sync up with reality, right? So how do we find what is true reality? Requires a lot of conversations, a lot of data, which some is not, immediately available. And again, the systems run forever, right? So it's just hard to know, like, are you in a lull within your long-term system? Are you maybe on an upswing, right? And this is a 1 to 2 peak years for this rep that you're talking to, right? And then they might fade out later, right? Like we don't have a great feel for what that looks like, right? So I think there's kind of pluses and minuses, right? And just we're all subject to the world that we live in of market economics, right? You got to make a living, but beyond that, how can we get the best out of people? I think we still have so much to learn.
yeah. I mean, I think this is like the statement of like sales comp plans are the worst way to
Mhm.
motivate people, but they're better than anything else that you have in
Yeah,
sales specifically.
yeah,
I think that like everything you're saying, I'm aligned with. It's we don't have good data. It's not transparent across organizations to be able to define a contract like you would with an athlete
hmm
and just pay for performance. And you kind of see it, right? Like, look at the fact that we're in a world where people are paying, $100 million contracts for certain key people to join companies because their AI expertise. I mean, like,
hmm
if you have that data, you have that knowledge. People like businesses will naturally price the value of the resource. In this case, if
hmm
it's a sales rep or if it's a AI engineer, I mean, like, they're going to value it based off of what's going to bring to the business. It's not, yeah, it's not there. It's not available. When you talk about the performance cycles, again, it's also very difficult to tell. There's so many things that come together in the world of sales comp. Like, what is good performance is actually very difficult to tell because quota setting drives 80% of the outcome of a comp plan. Like, and did you set the right quotas? Was there an outlier
Mm,
this year? This person is underperforming, or did they just have a cakewalk of a year and now you think of them as the best rep in the in the team, and not it's not true because they just got
mm,
given a quota that was not anywhere near the potential within that account. And I think comp plans are kind of directionally, they point the sales team in a way that hopefully aligns with what the business needs if you set the right
mm.
metrics and the right incentives. And financially, it enables you to not miss out on paying that superstar because they're thinking they're going to push for that 400 or 500K,
Mhm.
accelerated earnings. But then, you kind of take the risk off of the individual. But
Yeah, I think just to comment on that last piece, like use sports again, like baseball, right? Maybe somebody hits a bunch of home runs, but their field is, it caps out at 250 feet, while somebody else, their home field is 450 feet, right? And
yeah,
well, maybe that person who's in the 450-foot, team, they could be hitting way more home runs if they were in this other field more frequently, right? Like it's not apples to apples across the board. That's why I totally agree with you there. But
yeah,
maybe to take it a step further when it comes to like pay curves, right? Because I think this is
yeah,
something that might lead to this. I would think if you're extrinsically motivated, the ideal compensation plan would be exponential. Look at something like y equals x squared. So if your attainment was 50%, you get 25% comp. At 90%, you get 81% comp. But as it flips right above one, 120% attainment is 144% comp. Maybe there's like
yeah,
some cap you have to put
yeah.
on or decelerate at some point, but that would show every deal, the most important deal is the next deal. And the only way to get to the next deal is to close this deal right now, right? So
Yeah.
every deal is worth more and more and more. So there's a massive, massive incentive for the reps to just keep selling every time they
Yeah.
can. From my worldview, or maybe the perspective I'm just trying to bring to the table is maybe a logarithmic scale where, again, you pay the most on the first deal and then less every one after that. I use it because I'm desperate to be a meathead. I like going to the gym. You can go and transform your body pretty well within like kind of a 12 to maybe 20-week period and get noticeable gains, especially if you've never been before.
Yeah.
You lose weight or put on muscle, whatever your goal is. After maybe that first year, the gains become much, much harder, right? And those who really want to get massive or super strong or whatever it might be, that takes years and years and years, right? And the difference between somebody who's been doing it, yeah,
Consistency. Yeah.
5 years and 10 years, they might look a lot closer than somebody who's maybe 5 years and 2 years. But like that distance from 5 to 10 to get put on one more pound of muscle took maybe 5 years for somebody, right? And they had to do the exact same amount of work, if not more, to get those achievements, right? And that's maybe where you want to reward the work in sales. Somebody does right away, right? Like we recognize the work you're doing. Here's your quick pay, right? But if you just you want you to do the right thing long term, right? So it will be harder for you to earn these higher accelerated rates. It's just going to take you hard. It's going to be harder and harder and harder. And there will be, it's almost a theoretical cap, right? You might never get there. You can still keep selling forever. But when the company is protected, right, from these weird outlier deals, maybe someone again just gets lucky. I think that's what companies complain about the most. Like, we're paying so and so 300 grand on this one deal here that we think is mostly a renewal anyways. Right? Like, there's a lot of things that can pop up on that front, right? This protects from that, and you really just reward people who are really grinding, right? I think that's kind of the meritocracy a lot of people want to pursue. Hey, if you do the hard work, we'll pay you, right? But we
Yeah.
can't pay you so excessively because this deal is just an outlier and is worth way more than something else. It's this long-term approach. Again, harder to do, right? But if we're
Yeah.
extrinsically motivated, the exponential curve is better. If we're intrinsically motivated, the kind of logarithmic curve would be better.
Yeah. I mean, I think there's an interesting, even in the extrinsic
Mm-hmm.
approach where you're like, you do the exponential model, how much could a rep actually sell
Mm-hmm.
is the bigger question. Like, and this is why it goes back to quota, because it's like, what is that 100%? What do
Mm-hmm.
we actually believe this person can handle from like a workload volume? Like, what does it take to close a deal? How much can a single individual possibly bring in? And then what are we willing to say is good, worth that 100%? I think it might
Yeah.
actually be a combination of the two, like
Mm-hmm.
between zero what good looks like, you're willing to pay more every incremental deal.
Mm-hmm.
But those that get to good, like the pursuit of being the best,
Mm-hmm.
actually starts to turn into logarithmic because basically it's like, okay, you're pursuing excellence, and
Hmm.
so sure you're making more money along the way, but every incremental deal actually like starts to taper out. So I like that approach from like a capping
Hmm.
model because at that point, intrinsic motivators could be a good driver of like why people, competing to be the number one rep at President's Club or something like that, right? It's a good framing of like, here are the two possible paths you could potentially go, and kind of they're
Hmm.
both on the exact opposite.
Hmm.
And then where do you like mesh the two together, or kind of could create a really unique pay curve that's actually well structured.
Yeah, I think there's, the X squared one, right? Like at 200% attainment, that's 400% comp, right? If you get to 300%, that's nine. Like there
Yeah.
is like some, like it just doesn't work. And like you're just over incentivized. Like where is that threshold where somebody will go further for you for that next deal, but then like it will just decrease each, like that motivation, or like there is some sort of internal cap everybody has, like, you know what, that's enough for me, right? Like
Yeah.
there's no reason like for me to keep, if it's really hard they won't do it, right? Or there's a point where they'll sit on their laurels, right? I don't think it's that many people that will ever sit on their laurels, especially if you keep it like you, that's a huge jump, right? At
Yeah.
that
I mean,
level.
yeah, for
um
sure. Yeah.
but do you need that much of incentive to move somebody, right? If we truly are extrinsically motivated, right? Like that would move the most needle for you, right? Like so that would be a good plan. So how do you balance those two, right? I think that's always something I try and do, right? In any plan I design.
Yeah. Um, so I'd love to like just kind of dig right into like maybe an experience that you've had. Like obviously you've worked at numerous different firms, totally different industries in some cases.
Mhm.
Like what are the best and worst things that you've seen kind of in practice when it comes to incentives?
Probably best things that I've seen are where everybody makes a lot of money. I know it sounds like impossible to do, where more than 75% of the team achieves quota and actually makes a lot of money. Those generally, at least my experience, only work well for some things that are like 1099 styled sales roles, right? Like just like you kind of eat what you kill, right? It's not
Yeah.
like a 50-50 pay mix, 150-150. It's like we're going to give you a base of like 25 to 40, right? And that's like you can pay your monthly bills as needed here, but like unless you kill it, right, you're not going to make any money here, right? But quotas are effectively a little bit lower in those situations. People really like working for those organizations. I think some of that is survivorship bias that I've seen, right? Like the ones who stay obviously really like, maybe it's the intrinsic thing,
And
right?
they're
They
very
really
good
like it
at
and
it.
they're very
Exactly.
good at it, right? So they're
Yeah.
naturally going to stick. But I know from seeing all those new reps come and go that it's clearly not for everybody, right? So it's just kind of about finding your fit in those situations. Some of the worst plans I've seen, it's where people say they want the plans to be simple. This make my own biases, right? Like when you say simple, do you want like the plan to just be like basic? I'll give you a flat rate, 5% commission. Like that's simple, right? But does it do something? It has to be easy to understand, but advanced at what it does, right? So how do you make that simple? It's never simple. You have to design things where you're intentional about what you really want from an outcome, what the expectations are for excellence, what you basically expect from everybody supporting the sales team around them, right? The sales ops designing the quotas, enablement helping them sell, right? Marketing having the right message, pricing being set appropriately, right? Like all these things kind of have to come together. Um, but when the plans don't do that, it can lead to chaos very quickly. I'm sure you've heard these stories too, right? Comp plans are usually the first thing you get blamed when things go wrong, right? Because you can usually just pull your lever pretty quickly and make a change. And even if it's positively received, right, it might not do what you're intending it to fix at the end of the day. So I always try and take a step back and say, okay, how does data pass through the system, right, from beginning to end, right? Is this a quota setting problem? Is this a pricing problem? Is it like a marketing messaging problem? As a sales comp person, I don't have the exact perfect answers for any of those, but I definitely want to be close to the people that are helping make those decisions, right? I think one thing I discovered when I was in private aviation, of all places, the one thing that ruined a flight for a super wealthy person was not that the flight was late or anything like that. It was just that their catering food came cold, right? Like things that you don't think are important. It's not to say they're not important, right? But completely secondary to why you would pay $50,000 to fly from LA to New York. You want like warm sandwiches, not cold sandwiches, right? Like weird things like that. So people who are up or who are attentive to their details, right, on the operation side can help smooth things out for the sales reps at the end of the day. Because if they're misaligned, the sales rep is selling an experience, at least there, that doesn't quite sync up with what somebody else was expecting. Um, It's funny how like price can drive those things, right? If that flight was $40,000 and the food was still cold, but they feel like they got good value out of it, I'm not sure, right? So it's just about setting the expectations on that front, right? Can operations sync with the comp plan that the salespeople can deliver that matches, does price meet your value essentially?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, well, this is where, again, you kind of have to be tied to the whole end-to-end process when designing a comp plan because it's
Hmm.
like uh, knowing what the product is, or maybe there's, incremental add-ons, packages, whatever it is that end up actually resulting in a better customer outcome if the rep was, again, aligned or incentivized. But
Yeah, I think it's like segmentation comes into play on that
yeah.
front.
Yeah.
This is just tech companies, in my experience. They have this SMB, mid-market enterprise. It's universal across all of them. And I don't know why, right? Like your buyers in SME or SMB or mid, wherever they are, just because they're at a size of a company, that's kind of how they've decided to go to somebody, right? I think there could be so much better market research.
Oh,
Um,
for sure.
again,
Like,
like using my private aviation example, right? Like when people think of private aviation, they generally think of celebrities flying to like Mallorca or someplace exotic, right? And the truth is, it's mostly private equity, venture capital, investment managers flying from New York to Florida Monday through Thursday. That's it. That's far less sexy all of a sudden, right? But if you don't know that's your buyer at the end of the day, it's kind of hard to deliver a value proposition. And then private is no different than buying a car, right? You have your small cars, your SUVs, your truck. There's different versions. Like you have large groups flying or small groups flying, right? You have to be able to know how to segment who you're pitching to, and companies aren't as good at this. And I think they're leaving money on the table. And usually the reps are the ones that suffer. Reps are viewed as quick to discount. Um, Sometimes rightly so. They are kind of quick to discount. But it's one, the product isn't perceived as good as it is. And then when you discount it right away, you're basically admitting in a lot of ways that this is not a good product, that you can take it for less. And then if you drop the price too low, then it's like, does it have any value? The example I always use is, would you ever buy a brand new Ferrari for $15,000? Sounds like a screaming deal, right? But you'd be like, is this really even a Ferrari, right? Is it a complete knockoff? Is it going to be dead in 100 miles here, right? The price has to match the buyer's experience. And I think all companies could be much better at this, right? Who's buying? Why are they buying? Which features of your product matter, right? When you're going into these demos when you're doing your walkthroughs, right? Do they even care what you're walking through them for? Maybe they care about just one administrative compliance thing that some law somewhere in Albania pops up, right? Like they have to be complicit to, right? And you don't do that, they're not going to buy from you, right? You could double your price and only have that one feature covered. They might buy from you, right? Like it just depends on the context. I think segmenting, again, just based on the size of the company, doesn't really do much from the reps perspective, like doesn't help them kind of focus of it. And it doesn't really kind of lead to greater profits for the organizations. At least again, that's just my experience. Maybe you've seen something different, but the segmentation is, I think, wildly overlooked from a planning and ops perspective. It's something I think pretty much all companies could do better at.
for sure. I mean, well, there's so much data. And this again
Hmm.
goes back to like most organizations are still doing things not that different from
Hmm.
how it was done like 30 years ago. And the ideal way that you should be segmenting, and you kind of touched on this, but like you should be aligning customer to sales process slash motion that you want to run. And that mapping is more important than like what size the organization is.
Hmm.
Because even selling to a large enterprise, you might be selling to one division. Is that the same thing? Is
Hmm.
that better to be run through more in mid-market, like
Hmm.
sales motion versus enterprise sales motion? I mean, yeah, there's
For
so
sure.
much to optimize with that if you actually like drive down and really look at like the data that we have at most organizations and how little of it is used
Hmm.
during an actual like go-to-market planning and design perspective. And so,
Yeah, we almost have too much information. Like it's just paralysis by analysis sometimes, right? Like I can't make a decision. I'm just going to do what's worked before, right? You just go to your heuristics versus the data.
yeah.
It's a challenge.
I mean, yeah, this is the power of AI, right? Like if you actually can get all that data, get it tagged and kind of standardized, then you actually can start to see these patterns emerge. And to me, I've always talked about incentives. Like one of the original slogans that we had when I first started Forma was the right incentive to the right rep at the right time. And this concept like individualization of incentives.
Hmm.
Then you say that, and people are like, "Oh, that's unequal. It's inequality." And it's like it doesn't mean that you're going to have like plan like crazy proliferation, but the fact that we like today live in a world where, oh, okay, the end of the fiscal year, your comp plan's done, and now it restarts, and you probably won't get it for the first month or two because, by the time quota settings all finalized and wrapped up and the numbers are reported to the street, like we're ready to report to the street. So it's like you have this lull period of 1 to 2 months when
Mhm.
it's like sales cycles haven't stopped. It's like, why don't we think about it from a sales motion perspective? Like here's a bounty for this deal. If you close this deal, we know how much this is worth. But to do that is like a totally different. It takes the data problem that exists within sales comp and makes it complicated today and makes it 1,000 times more complicated.
Mhm.
And I think most organizations aren't ready for that. I mean, yes, that's kind of the the vision that I see in the future is like you actually can use all this data to make
Yeah,
better.
just to put a button on it when people say, "Oh, but you do all these," like this isn't fair because this person got that, and like, well, you say you like competition, and salespeople say all the time they're competitive, right? But you want things equal, right? Like, well, that's not by definition competitive. That's seeking an equal outcome, right? So, I
Yeah.
think people sometimes don't know what they want specifically, but yeah, that's something I've encountered too. Like, this isn't
Yeah.
fair, right? Well, we're being competitive here, right? This is our competitive advantage right
Yeah.
here in this moment for this person, right? We're trying to help them, right? We will do the
Yeah.
same for you in not an exact situation, but a similar context where you have an advantage and we can make this deal and we can close it and you get paid a bunch of money. That would be a win for everybody, right? But at this
Yeah.
exact time, it doesn't benefit you, right? Delivering those measures is always harder than you think it should be.
Yeah. No, for sure. Yeah. It's the human nature of,
Mm,
of it all. It always
mm,
comes in the way. But I've really enjoyed this philosophical discussion. I think
mm,
it's been great. And it's always good to kind of pressure test, I think, the world of sales comp because
mm,
you call out where the gaps are, where are the items that you need to address. But no, I've really enjoyed our discussion, Ryan. I think I
mm,
always ask two questions before the end of the episode. One, what's kind of a good resource, whether it's a
mm.
book, podcast, anything that you would recommend to the audience?
For books, because I mentioned parenting, and I just want to be a good parent. It's like my goal in life right now. And it's related to this. It's a book called Punished by Rewards. It's by Alfie Kohn. Again, it's just a part of our discussion, right? Like all these things that you do to raise a good child in this world, right? If you start doing these like extrinsic incentives, right, you're likely not to get the outcomes that you want out of it, right? So it's just a good way to pressure test how we look at things. Is this the right way to do it, right? Like there's a difference between incenting people in a business, obviously, and growing children, but in a perfect world, maybe they're a little bit closer together than we like. And I just find that's probably my favorite book. Outside of that, I like to read just generally systems or science oriented books. My personal political world bias is I never want to read business books. It just basically repeats the same stuff over and over and over. I like stuff that presents stuff from a more academic or unique perspective that either has been tried and failed, or hasn't been tried, might work, right? So that other book is The New Human Rights Movement. It's by this guy named Peter Joseph. It's actually not a great, but like the book is dense. Like it's hard to read, but I learned so much of that from like how to automate things, open source, localize kind of your work, everything you do in life. Just gives you a way to think about how you view your own world and then kind of just how to put concepts around it and kind of framework. So like this is what I believe and why I believe, right? So I think it was really good for that.
Those are some good recommendations. I'm
Mm,
definitely going to check. Yeah, I'm definitely going to
mm,
check them out. I also am trying to be the best parent I can be, and
mm. It's so
Punished by
hard.
Rewards is good. Yeah, it is
It's
hard.
so hard.
The second thing is, just what's the best way for people to reach out to you if they want to, get a hold or connect?
LinkedIn is always pretty good. Like if people want to shoot me an email, right now it's rfarber@barracuda.com. I'm always willing to answer any questions, right? Have more philosophical discussion with people, right? Like anything new you've tried in the world, right? I always love hearing like we're doing this test, right? It's a unique. We don't know if it's going to work. I just love learning about new things, right? What moves people, right? Whether it's as groups or as individuals, anybody who's doing something, I'd love to be a part of it in the future.
Amazing. Well, thank you, Ryan. This is
Yeah,
great. Absolutely.
appreciate it.
Forward
Thank you so
to,
much.
that's
Have a good day.
The Sales Competition Show is brought to you by Forma AI, the sales performance management platform that fully integrates sales planning with rapid, scalable incentive compensation management. Our data platform brings together how you can plan and manage the entire lifecycle of territories, quotas, and incentives. With global customers like Autodesk, Stryker, and Hootsuite, we enable go-to-market teams to plan and deploy even the most complex SPM strategies at speed, taking you from idea to execution instantly. To learn more about Forma AI, visit our website at forma.ai. Hit the subscribe button and find more episodes of the show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube. Thanks for tuning in.